question. For today, we are going to be reading a very important topic within A Course in Miracles, which combines two ideas that you might not think to combine them. One is it combines the concept of the atonement, which is the unification with all creation. Two, with the concept of a defense or a protection. And so that needs some explanation. And I have a few introductory slides that will go over that, and then we'll get into the reading. So there are these two themes, the atonement and then the defense, which is almost always associated. Defense means you're afraid, you need protection. It implies a separated state of mind. And through the marvels of the Holy Spirit's solution, she's going to reinterpret defenses to be useful for atonement. And so some of the ideas that we'll cover today is that the atonement will help us to defend the truth. The atonement will be a lesson in shifting our perception, and we'll also consider briefly the atonement as a function of time or its role in time. All this will become more meaningful when we get into it. And then we'll also simultaneously contrast that with the separated state of mind, the ego state, which uses defense mechanisms all the time so that it can maintain its sense of control over your perceptual system. It will bombard you daily with its perceptions to try to convince you that you should believe in them. And this results because everyone wants to feel safe and secure. But what we find psychologically is that these defense mechanisms can be weaponized and used to hurt and to keep away from the truth. And so all that we will cover today. Before we, this is, I've thrown a lot at you here. There are many defense mechanisms. You can think of these as psychological states that are intended to try to protect your frightened self from what seem to be the illusions of the world, to try to keep you secure in your own bubble, in your own self-made purgatory. Defense mechanisms are ways of reacting to situations that would keep you stuck in your ego self. But there's one defense mechanism listed here at the bottom that can be used positively. It can only be, is the defense mechanism that can only be used positively. All the other defense mechanisms can be used weaponized, or in the hands of the Holy Spirit, they can be used for good. So, having said all that, we'll look at these through two lenses: defenses that can be used in service of protection, or defenses used in service of attack. So we use the metaphor of a two-edged sword. All that and more we'll cover today. Hello and welcome to Miracles on High Plains. My name is Jonica, and our reader today is David S.
You can do anything I ask. I have asked you to perform miracles and have made it clear that miracles are natural, corrective, healing, and universal. There is nothing they cannot do, but they cannot be performed in the spirit of doubt or fear. When you are afraid of anything, you are acknowledging its power to hurt you. Remember that where your heart is, there is your treasure also. You believe in what you value. If you are afraid, you will inevitably value wrongly, and by endowing all thoughts with equal power, will inevitably destroy peace. That is why the Bible speaks of the peace of God, which passeth understanding.
So the context here is very personal. This is about you and me and everybody else as individuals, and how we live with our own fears and doubts, and what structures psychologically and emotionally and intellectually we put up in order to try to make ourselves feel safe, even when the fears are arising from deep within us. We put up these structures. And so miracles are a way of bringing about the healing from all of those ego defenses and confusion, but they can't be performed when one is in a state of doubt or fear. So doubt or fear, self-made fears, are going to interfere with our readiness to perform miracles. And in that, let's see, the decision is, the power of my decision is my own. It's your own mind that chooses what to accept in and put your faith into, or what to reject. And so if you're afraid of anything, it's because your mind is acknowledging its power to hurt you. It said another way, it's because you believe the illusions are threatening to your being. And so when you're afraid, it is actually a mistaken choice. It's an error by valuing the illusion instead of the truth. And this is what mind training is needed for, to learn the difference here, because without mind training, a person will endow every single thought that arises in their mind with equal power. And this will destroy peace, because every thought and feeling you have that is ego prompted, if you endow it with power, it will create chaos within your own being. It'll ruin your inner peace. Okay, so all this is the framework that we have for why does the ego use defense mechanisms. So we're talking about a state of doubt and uncertainty and insecurity, a feeling of inadequacy, and then reacting to the world based upon those beliefs and defending oneself, trying to protect oneself with intellectual, emotional, and psychological resistance to those threats. We should say that most people act as if the threat were coming from outside them, when what we know is that the error was made by our own mind mistakenly attributing the source to being external rather than recognizing the internal source of our doubts and fears. We'll go on.
This peace is totally incapable of being shaken by errors of any kind. It denies the ability of anything not of God to affect you. This is the proper use of denial. It is not used to hide anything, but to correct error. It brings all error into the light. And since error and darkness are the same, it corrects error automatically. True denial is a powerful protective device. You can and should deny any belief that error can hurt you. This kind of denial is not a concealment, but a correction. Your right mind depends on it. Denial of error is a strong defense of truth, but denial of truth results in miscreation, the projections of the ego. In the service of the right mind, the denial of error frees the mind and reestablishes the freedom of the will. When the will is really free, it cannot miscreate because it recognizes only truth.
So in this paragraph, there is an example of the principle we're talking about today. The example we're using is the defense of denial. If you understand this example, then all the other defense mechanisms are just variations on this principle here. And that is, there are two uses of denial. One is to deny the truth. This would be the ego's use of denial. The other is to deny the error. This is what we mean by a two-edged sword. You can use it to deny error, but also if you do wind up using denial as your way of responding to situations, know that the same ability can also cut both ways. So if you use it to deny error, you can also use it to deny the truth. And we can list a dozen other defense mechanisms that operate the same way. You can use it for truth, but it also can be used for error. And bottom line principle, the atonement is the only defense that can be used for protection only. Said another way, you cannot attack with the atonement. It's only used for good. Therefore, the atonement is the perfect defense. It's the one thing that can make you feel fully safe and secure and cannot be used mistakenly for attack, cannot be used against the truth. And so, and in the rest here in this paragraph, we go into the specifics of the nature of denial, which is a very interesting lesson. I recommend that you study it so that you grasp how the denial can be used both ways. And then you'll be able to see how that pattern repeats with all the other defense mechanisms. Okay, so just a few highlights here then about denial. When used properly, true denial is a powerful protective device. You should deny any belief that the error can hurt you. You must learn to say no to illusions, to say no to the ego's promptings. You should do that. And that kind of denial does not conceal anything, but it corrects the mistake. It's used to deny any belief that error can hurt you. And your own mental sanity depends on the ability for you to use denial against illusions, to deny the errors. So why? Because that leaves you in a state, if you were to train your mind to deny errors, that would lead you only with the truth. And so it becomes a strong defense of truth. And then the denial of these errors will then free your mind and allow you reestablishes the freedom of the will, meaning it frees your mind from using your mind's power to make illusions seem real, miscreation. It frees your mind from that and then allows you to repurpose the power of your mind only to align with that which is true, which is reestablishing the freedom of your true will. And when the will is really free, it cannot miscreate. Only truth remains. This is the ideal state. This is the healed mind. This is the goal of the Course of Miracles, is to heal our mind so we no longer use it as a weapon against our peace, but only use our mind for truth. Okay, so we talked about denial, and we said that there are many other defense mechanisms, but they all have the same nature here, twofold nature, either to used for truth or for error. And by the way, every single member of our planet has been using defense mechanisms without knowing it. And just to illustrate one extreme example, the belief in time and space is a defense mechanism used to deny eternity and infinity. This would probably be really hard to imagine, but the ego wants you to believe that your current location in space and your current time in the millennium is what matters most, is what's real, and would have you concentrate all the powers of your belief into that situation rather than acknowledge that eternity and infinity is where you were created, is where you belong, is where your true nature is expressed. Will, you had your hand up.
Yeah, this is the first time I've really heard denial used in the context of, denial for good.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's an interesting concept because to me, denial it's like it doesn't exist, when you're in the denial phase. And I'm more familiar with the dark side of denial because that's what alcoholics go through to say to themselves they're okay and to justify their behavior. And just to tie it all together, how I got out of my place of denial was through truth. And it was from having that moment of clarity of understanding what my life was really like, not what I had created, my ego had created in my mind about what my life was. And that's it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you. It is true that many people already have a learning around denial. And so this lesson here becomes particularly difficult in the sense that we're now saying there's a whole additional lesson that you did not know about using denial. And we're saying it's not only true of denial, that it's true of all these other defense mechanisms as well. So it's having part of the story is not enough. You need the whole picture. Kim?
So I think one of the greatest revelations for me around this concept occurred when I saw very clear that I have a choice in my thoughts.
Yes.
Prior to that, my ego would drag me into this mindset of I had no choice around my fears. I had no choice around my behaviors. I had no choice around my actions. And so I think this idea of choice, we call it mind training here too, right?
Yes.
Mind training. We have a choice in those matters. And to me, that's a very basic step for being able to get to this part of what you're talking about today. And I think that people get very stuck in this. They think they do not have a choice in their thoughts, because I used to be that. I used to believe that way. And so that's been a huge freedom for me.
Yeah, thank you for saying that, Kim. I think the default assumption teaching in the world is that you don't have a choice regarding the thoughts and feelings that arise. That would be like the unexamined position, and the whole sense of taking responsibility for the power of your own decision making comes as a surprise to many people because they hadn't heard the message before. Susie?
Just to comment on everything that's been said, it's funny now after doing this for so long, for multiple times over and over and over again. Now I'll say to myself, I'm in denial because I'm thinking with the ego mind. You know what I mean? So like, meaning like, um, I'm in denial that I'm a child of God. I'm in denial if I'm in any way upset, agitated, irritated, and my ego tries to tell me that's what I am. It's sort of kind of what Kim was saying, no, that's not true. I'm not thinking with the right mind or the thought adjuster or the however or the Holy Spirit. So if I'm in a mood, I am actually I am denying who I really am. Does so like that, like there's another that's a whole other way of looking at it. I am denying my true inheritance and I am denying who I really am, So like it kind of comes full circle, or you kind of start to understand it in a different way, the more you do it.
Yeah.
But does that make sense to you, Jonica?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. And I'd like to build upon what you said, Susie, if you're finished. I'm doing workbook lesson 152, and it says every state of mind which is temporary. You mentioned if I'm in a mood, a bad mood. Lesson 152 says, well, every state that's temporary, that arises, you experience it, and then it's gone in some amount of time, is by itself an illusion, because reality doesn't rise up and then disappear. Reality is permanent and stable and continuous. And so here's a filter you can use. Is this thought and feeling I'm having going to pass? Or is this part of the original state, the eternal state? And that criteria tells you right there what the nature of the thought or feeling is.
And I just want to add what I love about the courses. It says, you might not get this now. You might not get it yet, right. But the Holy Spirit saves everything for you and meets you where you're at. And, so it's like, I don't get all like messed up anymore over like, I don't get it. I don't understand it. I don't feel it. I know I will eventually if I just keep going. And that's what I love about that's one of the things I love about the course. It's not telling me I must understand this right now yet.
Right. All right, we'll take one more comment and then we need to move on. David W.
Yeah, I love that insight, Susie. Heather came up with a really good mantra last week that I've been using. And instead of even going to the upset, I just go to this affirmation. I am one. I have everything. My needs are met. And I can add only with God to those. But if I just repeat that, that's the denial that I'm not in. I love the way that you thought of that. It's a denial that I am one. I have everything. My needs are met by God. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you, David. So add to your vocabulary this line, proper use of denial. Proper is to use denial as a tool for the truth. I am a child of God. I am as God created me. I'm sorry. I am not an ego. I am not a body. I am free. My examples are not so good right now. All right, let's go on.
You can defend truth as well as error. The means are easier to understand after the value of the goal is firmly established. It is a question of what is it for, of what it is for. Everyone defends his treasure and will do so automatically. The real questions are, what do you treasure? And how much do you treasure it? Once you have learned to consider these questions and to bring them into all your actions, you will have little difficulty in clarifying the means. The means are available whenever you ask. You can, however, save time if you do not protract this step unduly. The correct focus will shorten it immeasurably.
So one could read this and wonder, what are they talking about? In fact, there is a real profound and deep truth here, but it took me a long time to appreciate the meaning of it. So I'm going to try to break it down a little bit in case part of it escaped you. And that is, first of all, what is the thing you hold dearest in your heart? That is your treasure, the things you love the most. And there are like deeper treasures, and there are also intermediate treasures and more superficial treasures. And so the important thing here is, if you are to live your life with happiness and peace and love, you must treasure it. You must want to have peace, teach peace, to learn it. You must want it. You must learn to love, fall in love with wholeness and happiness and unity. Once the goal is firmly established in your mind, and that you are clear that above all else, I want peace, then the path to get there are easier to understand. Another way of saying this is, it does not make any difference at all of teaching you how to find peace if you don't want it. You have to want it, and then we can teach you how to find it, because you'll be motivated to apply yourself to the effort when these thoughts and feelings arise, so that you'll find peace there. And so the deepest question is, what is it that you treasure? And this causes you to look out into the depths of your heart and soul. This has provoked me over years to look into the depths of my heart and soul and ask, what is it that I really want to do with my life? What is it you treasure, and how much do you treasure it? For in other words, is it superficially valued, or is peace just something that is a nice to have thing? Or is it something that you treasure above all else? I want peace. And once you've learned to identify what it is that most is of most importance to you, then the clarity will come. The Holy Spirit will then provide you with the guidance, the understanding, and the clarity to find your way along that path. You'll have little difficulty in clarifying the means, not because you're so clever or wise, but because you align your goal with the goal of the Holy Spirit. And once you do that, you've opened the door to inner guidance. The means are available to you whenever you ask. However, this goes step back to the comment that is often made about how long does it take? How long is this going to take? You can save time if you do not protract this step unduly. For in other words, to be clear in finding out what it is that you treasure. This is what took me years, and this is why we're focusing on it. I could say that I protracted this step unduly by not being clear of what it was that was the most treasured value, or maybe I said the words but didn't fully align with it myself. So the correct focus will shorten your journey immeasurably, meaning you can then mobilize your willpower to join with the Holy Spirit in healing your path as you go. And then all things will be used as lessons for God, from God, to help you to learn your way forward. Susie?
Yeah, I know from my experience, this is exactly it. How much do I treasure it? And, I have said, I've shared, oh my God, I've prayed, I've wanted it. I want to be free. But, the Holy Spirit knows everything. And she knows when I really want it 100% above all else, I want to see differently. And when I mean it 90%. And when I really mean it 100%, I get relief. I swear to God. That is my experience. And sometimes I say, Holy Spirit, I'm asking. But she knows, and she's waiting there patiently. And when it's true. It's happened to me so many times that I have trust and faith that when I'm not getting relief, I know there's a part of me that's hanging on to Susie. And, that's just the way it is. Everything the Course says is true.
Yeah. This is why the struggle with the idols of this world, this is what comes up, is why I do have a couple pet favorite idols in the world that I'd like to hang on to in my journey to peace, because they're important to me. I've kind of built my identity around being good at these, or being recognized at those things. So I'd like to hang on to my idols if I could. Well, that didn't work. David?
These last 2 pages that we've had here have just been incredible for me. I'm one of these people, so there are moments when I grok the whole thing, and it's here. And about truth, error, what I treasure is what I'll get. What I seek is what I will find. If I seek the truth, I will find the truth. If I seek the falsehoods of the ego and the illusions and the darkness, I will find that. It's all about my focus. And that's how that last line, the correct focus, will shorten it immeasurably. It's all right here, right now. And it's completely up to us. Nobody else. I love it. These last 2 pages have been fantastic.
Thank you for sharing, brother. These are the foundation. These are the certain solid foundation must be established in the Course before we can go on to building the structures of the first and second floor of the building. We have to build a solid foundation. These are the solid foundations. And thank you for the way you expressed that. Let's go forward.
The atonement is the only defense that cannot be used destructively because it is not a device you made. The atonement principle was in effect long before the atonement began. The principle was love, and the atonement was an act of love. Acts were not necessary before the separation because belief in space and time did not exist. It was only after the separation that the atonement and the conditions necessary for its fulfillment were planned. Then a defense so splendid was needed that it could not be misused, although it could be refused. Refusal could not, however, turn it into a weapon of attack, which is the inherent characteristic of other defenses. The atonement thus becomes the only defense that is not a two-edged sword. It can only heal.
Okay, I want to point out a singular point, and then we'll bring the focus back to the bigger picture. The singular point has to do with a question that Lauren asked a few sessions ago, was about the past and when the atonement began, and in reference to where did the separation begin? Well, acts were not necessary before the separation because the belief in space and time did not exist. No one believed in space and time before the separation. They only believed in space and time after the separation. Okay, Heather, that answers the question that you had the other day about, because what I don't think I want to go into the beginning of the separation. Anyway, that's a helpful insight to understanding how the separation began, which is not our purpose today. That was kind of just a side comment here. Our purpose today is to understand what was the atonement. The minute the separation began, God gave an answer to how we could overcome the separation, and the atonement was the answer. It's an act of love. It's a principle of love. It's a reunion of all that was and is and can be, whereas a separation is a busting of it apart, or the illusion of it being busted apart. So it was after the separation that the atonement and the conditions necessary for the fulfillment of the atonement were planned. Another fine point, there are conditions necessary for the fulfillment of the atonement. You just can't leap out of total depression into the atonement, realization of the atonement, until you meet the conditions. And one of them, what we read about often, is to overcome your own self-made fears. The time that it takes to do that is not imposed upon you. So it's not a matter of time, it's a matter of willpower exercised on behalf of love. So meeting the conditions for atonement is necessary. So where are we going with this? We're going back into the beginning of time, the belief in time and space, right after the separation occurred. Now here comes the atonement along, the perfect solution. A defense that was so splendid was needed that it could not be misused, although it could be refused. However, it could not be turned into a weapon of attack, which is inherently characteristic of all other defenses, but not of the atonement. The atonement thus becomes the only defense that is not a weapon of attack. Its purpose can only heal. So what are we to draw from all that? That of this long list of defenses, the atonement is the only one that can not be used for a weapon of attack. And that is, when working with all those other defenses, one needs a trained mind, because otherwise, to use the example of denial, you might only use denial in its dark sense of denying the truth, and might not be aware that that same ability can be used to deny the error. One needs to train one's mind to use those other defenses effectively. The Holy Spirit is the one that is the source of that training. But with the atonement, you're on solid, secure ground. It can never be used to hurt, to harm, to judge against, to attack. And therefore, it's the perfect answer. As we said, the atonement principle is a principle of love and act of love. Susie?
Just quickly, John, like it's exactly what you said, whatever, 5 minutes ago, 10 minutes ago, all these other moods, all these other states,
Yep.
They're not permanent. They come and they go. The atonement just keeps us in peace and love and not in hell. So it makes so much sense.
Right. It does make so much sense. And it's so simple. Cleared away of all this detail, it's the one answer that you can always count on under all conditions. Even we know when you're really in a troubled state of mind, when things are really chaos, inner chaos, how the mind would want to find a solution. The atonement is your go-to, because it is always used to protect. It's a splendid defense that cannot be misused. David?
The atonement was built into the space-time belief to set a limit on the need for the belief itself, and ultimately to make learning complete. The atonement is the final lesson. Learning itself, like the classrooms in which it occurs, is temporary. The ability to learn has no value when change is no longer necessary. The eternally creative have nothing to learn. You can learn to improve your perceptions and can become a better and better learner. This will bring you into closer and closer accord with the sonship. But the sonship itself is a perfect creation, and perfection is not a matter of degree. Only while there is a belief in differences is learning meaningful.
So before I comment directly on the passage, I just want to make an observation in working with hundreds and hundreds of students over the last 11 years. The concept of the atonement, I observe this, how people struggle with the concept of the atonement. And all manner of efforts have been made within the course community to try to give definitions and meaning and everything to the atonement. Ultimately, it's an experience that you must have for yourself, not an intellectual line of words that you memorize. But the clue to it is right here, is the atonement is the final lesson. In other words, it will all be perfectly clear at the end of time when you reach the final lesson that you will ever need to learn. Then the atonement will be perfectly clear. And until then, your mind will make efforts to try to comprehend and make it clear. We all do that. You should do that. But know how, okay, let's express it this way. How are you going to understand perfect love when you view yourself and the world as imperfect and chaotic? How is the true meaning of perfect love going to be perfectly clear to you while you believe you're on the outside of perfect love? can happen. So the final lesson comes when all the barriers to the belief and the awareness of love's presence have been removed. Then perfect love becomes obvious, because you no longer hold on to any of the idols, the guilt, the past, any of the obstacles that would stand in their way. So the atonement is the final lesson. The learning is the process that we're in time, where atonement was given as a solution in time. So you can learn to improve your perceptions, and you can become a better and better learner. These sessions are designed to help you become a better and better learner. That's why we try to convey understanding and not just read the words or tell stories, but to look at what it's teaching, so that as you become a better learner, your will starts to align with the goals of the sonship. Said another way, that you treasure most of all the eternal truth, the values of spirit, and gladly and willingly align your own will with that. Yeah. So we're all on a path of learning to experience the atonement for ourselves. And there is a promise, a guarantee by God that one day you will fully understand. We would call it the return to love, the return to a perfect oneness with perfect love. David?
Evolution is a process in which you seem to proceed from one degree to the next. You correct your previous missteps by stepping forward. This process is actually incomprehensible in temporal terms because you return as you go forward. The atonement is the device by which you can free yourself from the past as you go ahead. It undoes your past errors, thus making it unnecessary for you to keep retracing your steps without advancing to your return. In this sense, the atonement saves time, but like the miracle it serves, does not abolish it. As long as there is need for atonement, there is need for time. But the atonement as a completed plan has a unique relationship to time. Until the atonement is complete, its various phases will proceed in time, but the whole atonement stands at time's end. At that point, the bridge of return has been built.
All right, so this can become a bit abstract because we're talking about movement in time versus being stuck in time. So let me illustrate being stuck in time for a moment so you understand what I mean. I'll share from my own life. My grandfather was a raging and violent alcoholic who passed those traits on to his 14 children, who were all alcoholics, who passed those traits on to my 67 cousins, who mostly are alcoholics. So we would say that they were continuing to make the same errors with regards to making a god out of the experience of alcohol, a demigod. Thus kept retracing their steps without advancing. Can you see the multi-generational lineage there? I witnessed the multi-generational lineage that existed in that side of my family's system. Okay. You could say that they're continuing to carry on the legacy of my grandfather and possibly before that. Don't know about what happened before that. So it's the idea of, until you learn the lessons, to deny the errors, the proper use of denial, until you learn to deny the errors that we make, you will continue to make those errors. And those errors, in many cases, are inherited, are passed on to us through either our family, our culture, our religious systems, our communities, the people that we grew up with. They pass on their illusions to us, the errors, and we hold on to them as if they were true and continue to repeat them until we learn better. Until we learn you can correct your previous missteps by stepping forward. But that requires that you learn to correct. So, taking the emphasis off of my family system, which I was only using to illustrate a point. By the way, I'm not an alcoholic. Broke the chain. Broke the chain of the multi-generation pattern there. The atonement is a method of helping us all to move forward in progress by correcting our errors and not keep repeating them. As long as there's need for atonement, there's a need for a time. Time will continue to go on until all the lessons have been learned. Atonement will be the final lesson, and then time will end. There'll be no need for time any longer when the final lesson has been learned. After all, how did all this get started? There was no belief in separation until time began. When time began, the separation began. The atonement was the answer. When that cycle has run its course, time will be over. We call that atonement as a completed plan. There are nuances to this which go beyond the scope of what we want to address today about the defense mechanisms of atonement. There's much more to be said from this plan of the ages to return the entire sonship back to the restoration, the awareness of perfect oneness. There's much more to be said, and clues are given here and there, but rather than trying to explore all those clues, we want to stay focused on how atonement can be used by you as the perfect defense mechanism. Susie?
So I have just a really good practical experience. It's a lot, maybe easy, so I had this conflict in my mind, and I kept asking for answers or relief or whatever. And one day I woke up and it was just there. Aha, just aha moment. And all my past thoughts, errors, whatever, were gone. And it wasn't necessary for me to keep retracing and asking. And it's gone. So for me, it's gone. So the time, it did take some time in this time and space, world for me to get there, but it's gone. And it's for me, I understand the principle now. Like there's no necessity. It's just gone. There's no necessity for me to even pray about it. I don't even think about it. So yeah, it's the miracle just is amazing. And as long as I still needed to ask for help and was in the conflict, I needed time. I don't anymore. So yeah, it's pretty, and that's just a small little practical example. And that's happened to me multiple times. All puns intended, I guess. Yeah.
Thank you, Susie. Just one more little thing that will you could put as a factoid. The completed, the entirety of the atonement stands at the end of time, at time's end. That's where the Holy Spirit stands, at time's end. She sees the beginning from the end. She sees the whole plan, not just today or yesterday, but she sees you and me and everyone else in the sonship in the form that we will appear at time's end, which, as we said, is the experience of perfect love, the awareness of perfect love. She views you as perfect. At time's end, you will view yourself as perfect, if not before.
The atonement is a total commitment. You may still think this is associated with loss, a mistake all the separated sons of God make in one way or another. It is hard to believe a defense that cannot attack is the best defense. This is what is meant by the meek shall inherit the earth. They will literally take it over because of their strength. A two-way defense is inherently weak precisely because it has two edges and can be turned against you very unexpectedly. This possibility cannot be controlled except by miracles. The miracle turns the defense of atonement to your real protection. And as you become more and more secure, you assume your natural talent of protecting others, knowing yourself as both a brother and a son.
So the following point is more subtle and not so easy to grasp if you're not accustomed to these ideas of psychological defense mechanisms that the ego uses, because they're all around us. They're reactions that we've had habitually throughout the world. Well, these are, as we said, they're two-edged swords that can be turned against you very unexpectedly. You can wind up using these mechanisms as a way of attempting to protect yourself, but without your even realizing it, because you're practicing using these defense mechanisms, very unexpectedly, they can wind up being used against you. And this possibility cannot be controlled by you, except it can be controlled by miracles. And so the miracle leads us to practicing the defense of the atonement only as our real protection. And so that we wind up becoming these three words that I love: secure, safe, and trusting of spirit. Inner peace is the feeling of being safe and secure and trusting. And when we do that, we can then become effective miracle workers by using our natural talent of loving others, knowing that others as knowing both ourselves and our brothers as true children of the Most High. David, you had your hand up.
Yeah. This is fantastic. I'm just going to say it. I talk a little bit of autobiographical stuff here, if I may.
Mhm.
So I came into this course several years ago, and I remember in the very beginning, Jonica and I had conversations about, what do you mean before space and time? How can there be anything before space and time? How can there not be space and time? These were things that were absolutely incomprehensible, the concept. Recently, I've been saying to myself, well, I missed a few classes because things have gone on. And I was saying to myself, maybe this year I'm just not going to go to classes as much and do this, that, and the other thing. And it just so happens that today is my reading day. So I happen to be here reading this particular chapter, which is, I think, probably one of the chapter that we read in the very beginning years ago that was just so overwhelming to me. And I confess that I have learned so much today in the rereading and the re-studying of this and recognizing where I am today, time, space, wherever, relative to where I was before. And there was a lesson that always puzzled me. In my defenselessness, my safety lies. And here it is, right here. It is hard to believe a defense that cannot attack is the best defense. The atonement. It's all, for some reason today, all becoming wrapped together in a package that I can comprehend. And what a blessing that is, and what a alteration in my perception. So I'm just reporting that there's been a change. I recognize a change.
Thank you, David. I want to go back just a second where we talk about learning, because David was just talking about his learning journey, would be one way to think of it. And you can learn to improve your perceptions and become a better and better learner. So the same things that you read, you could even have the passages memorized. It doesn't mean that you understand them fully, but you become a better and better learner. And that brings you closer and closer, becoming a better learner, into accord with the big plan, the macro plan, which encompasses all of time and space, which encompasses a perfect creation. And so we're all there with you, brother, on this plan of learning. We're all picking up new insights every day that we open our minds to it. Go ahead, Susie.
I just have to follow that with something that, Christ inspired miracles and Susie inspired miracles. It's so apropos because David has said to me, I don't know exactly what he just said. And I've kind of just kept quiet. Like, I've said a couple things like, really? Or, for me, it's a lifelong journey, or I can't imagine ever stopping, but not a whole lot more than that. And I have tears in my eyes because to hear him say that on his own, downloaded from the Holy Spirit, is an exact example of what we read, last week or 2 weeks ago about Christ inspired miracles and, Susie inspired, Susie trying to, control the situation. And yeah, so I just had to say that.
Yeah, I'm glad you did. All right. Thank you both for that sharing. To be continued here.
The atonement can only be accepted within you by releasing the inner light. Since the separation, defenses have been used almost entirely to defend against the atonement and thus maintain the separation. This is generally seen as a need to protect the body. The many body fantasies in which minds engage arise from the distorted belief that the body can be used as a means for attaining atonement. Perceiving the body as a temple is only the first step in correcting this distortion because it alters only part of it. It does recognize that atonement in physical terms is impossible.
So those of you that have an opportunity to look again at this material, please pay attention to this one simple sentence. The atonement can only be accepted by you by releasing the inner light. So we said before that until you're ready and willing for something, your mind will just put up obstacles. You won't understand it. It'll seem outside of you. Well, trying to understand the atonement when your mind is full of obstacles is similar to that. It's not an intellectual process. It's not something you do by just reciting a few sentences. The atonement is A, B, C, and D. You've got that down. The atonement has to be accepted by you. You have to let it into your heart and your soul, but it has to get past your mind first, into your heart and soul. And how is that done? By releasing the inner light within you. Now, our goal today isn't to go into how that we release the inner light. But this should be, if you want to understand the atonement, you have to accept that the way it's understood is by experiencing it and releasing the inner light within you. It cannot merely be an intellectual construct that one acquires. And many people struggle with this because they naturally take kind of an intellectual way of wanting to just learn what do those words mean. That's innocent enough, but some things must be experienced, and that's true with the atonement. You must release the inner light within you, which, by the way, is the same thing the Creator did when He created all of us, is He released the inner light within Himself and extended it out to others, and imbued us with the inner light. And then so we must affirm and witness to that by releasing the inner light within ourselves. So I want to take a moment to just do a few ideas that review what we said today. We said that these ego defenses are reactions to situations that we believe to be a threat to ourselves. And that these defenses can either protect us or they can be used to attack others. And they can be turned upon us very unexpectedly. And the whole source of these fears is a self-deception. It's a deception about what you truly are. And it results from giving your power to fear and thereby interfering with inner peace. And then the mind winds up being a miscreator. It winds up very confused about its purpose, and it believes it's there to continue to reinforce the ego defenses. And this is where denial comes in. We read about the proper use of denial and the improper use of denial. And so atonement becomes a way of securing your place with the truth, and that the only way you can really allow it to become part of you is by giving your light, releasing your light, to have, give all to all, to have the awareness of perfect love. You must be willing to participate in it, to be a participant in it. I was going to call it an actor, but a participant. And as you become more secure, you start to realize that your true spiritual self, your eternal self, which has not changed, is invulnerable to the ever-changing situations of time and space. And when you do that, you then are ready for miracles and resume our natural talent of helping to protect others. So, Kim, go ahead.
This is an incredible thing that you just put up here. Thank you so much for breaking this down this way. So, what is coming up for me on this is how much I used to not realize the mind errors and wasn't even aware of all these defenses that I had. And now that I am aware of it, it's so much quicker for me to self-correct. It's so much quicker for me to self-correct. But I love this chart. That's really what I wanted to tell you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And I just want to say that the graduate degree, we're not doing the graduate program right now, but the graduate program for this looks a little bit like going down this lengthy, graduate programs dive deep, going down these lengthy list of ego defenses and recognizing how each one of them can be used by the ego as a weapon of attack, or reinterpreted by the Holy Spirit as for good. That's for another day, not for today. For today, we just wanted to finish on inviting you to our next session, which, David, I think you'll enjoy. It's called The Altar of God, and we'll pick that up in our reading in our next session. So I want to thank you, David, for reading. Thank you all for your contributions, and just honor you for your willingness to be happy learners, to continue to progress along your learning path. I'm really inspired recently by this coffee mug, a photo of a friend of mine holding a coffee mug that says it's not so important what your velocity is, but the direction that you're moving. And so I honor you for the direction that you're moving. Namaste.
Namaste. Great class. Thank you, Jonica. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Jonica.
Thanks, all.
Namaste. Thanks, Jonica. Thanks, David.
Mm-hmm.
Come back.
My pleasure. Okay.
Okay. All right.